Welcome to the Project Endure podcast, the place where we talk about life, endurance, persistence, perspective, and so much more. I'm Joe Rinaldi, and I'll be your host. Let's jump in. Before we get started, let me ask you a question. Have you ever noticed that what you wear has the power to change how you feel? Project Endure apparel is designed to remind you that easy won't make you stronger, and that growth is an uncomfortable choice that we all have the privilege to make every day. Look good, feel good, and perform good. Head to the link in the show notes to shop Project Endure apparel and keep on doing hard things. Now, let's get to the episode. Welcome back to the Project Endure podcast, episode 33. We have myself, Joe Rinaldi, and we have a very, very special guest out on the West Coast, Chase Chewning. Chase, how are you, man?
Joe, good to be here. Thanks for having me. Pleasure to hop on board this whole podcasting thing. It's my jam.
Of course, man. Yeah, for people who heard us speak on the Pursuit podcast, they know that you are actually one of the people who helped get me into the podcasting world. And you, in my eyes, are kind of a royalty in the podcast world. So.
I haven't heard that one before. Thank you, man. Thank you. Maybe like sort of kind of OG. I don't know, but royalty's cool. That's cool. I'll take it.
Yeah. Well, why don't you tell the people a little bit about yourself? Tell them about how you got into podcasting, and we'll dive in from there.
So how I got into podcasting? Well, I think maybe like a lot of people, I was a consumer first. I still think I was kind of late to the game, but now podcasting has picked up so much steam over the last couple of years. People are just now finding this platform, which is great. But I first discovered it in about 2015, like early 2015. And someone, I think like a client of mine, I was a health coach at the time. It was like a client or a friend. Somebody was like, "Hey, you're into health, right? You should check out this podcast." I was like, "What the hell is a podcast?" Like it's like a talk show. It's like radio, but it's on your phone. And so they showed me. I opened up my smartphone, my iPhone, and sure enough, there it was, the purple Apple Podcast app. And started listening to some health and fitness and wellness podcasts and fell in love, partly because it helped me really condense my commute time. I was working in Washington, D.C. and all around Northern Virginia. So anybody knows the DMV area, traffic is no joke. So it passed the time. And then I was a health coach, a clinical health coach at the time. So I would show up to my two offices that I worked, and I traveled up and down the East Coast a lot. And I would show up to my other team of coaches and our clients and patients, and I would just have so much more new, current evidence, resources, facts, all the things to help us be better coaches and to provide better materials and coaching and curriculum, fitness, nutrition, wellness for our clientele. And I was like, man, this is amazing. I don't need to travel as much, even though I love traveling. Like I don't need to go to as many conferences, or, I can maybe skip reading the book and just listen to the author on the podcast, give me the best information. And I just fell in love because I was learning so much so quickly. More importantly, I could very quickly turn around and apply that information. So it was not as much of just like a pastime or an entertainment thing, which is great. There are a lot of great entertainment podcasts out there, but I was like, this is a really good use of my time. And I decided, you know what, if I'm learning this much listening, what would it be like if I was the one asking the questions, talking to these people? So I got this idea, and it's actually kind of funny timing. We're here in May 2022. Like 2 weeks ago, I had this little annual reminder thing. I use this app called Time Hop, and it shows me on this day a year ago, on this day 10 years ago. Well, on May 6th, it showed me this day, May 6th, 2015. 2016. I wrote a note on my phone. I said, podcast idea, Ever Forward Radio. And then I just started to figure it all out and got to doing it and launched a few months later. And it was great. It again kept me learning, and I was just so connected to these people doing amazing things in my field. and then I could then immediately apply it to my field. So I went from being a consumer to a creator.
Oh man. And now Ever Forward Radio has how many episodes out?
I can tell you, let me pull up my calendar. I should know this off the top of my head, right? But yesterday was episode 604, went live.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And I would imagine that through all the conversations you've had on the podcast, you've got to hear some pretty amazing stories. Are there any stories that stand out to you? Any people who really just stick out to you?
You know, particularly people who stick out to me, stories of people that stick out to me. The first one that really usually comes to mind is Bedros Keuilian. This incredible fitness empire guy. He's the founder, no longer CEO. He actually now has a new CEO in place, Bryce Henson, of Fit Body Boot Camp, a very, very fast growing fitness boot camp gym, training facility. And, you look at some people and you're like, wow, you're really successful and you're great and admirable and all these things. But then when you understand how they got to be there, like quite literally, like, how did you get here today? Like, how are you alive kind of thing? He's one that always stands out. Just long story short, his family fled, Soviet Russia with just the clothes on their back. And just to hear what he and his family had to go through, fleeing their home country, coming to America and just surviving, like literally surviving out of trash cans and dumpsters. And just, now he's this multi-millionaire who's just so happy and fulfilled and making so many other opportunities for other people. As well as last year, actually, I sat down with the Sun Life Organics founder. I don't think they're out east with you yet. They're an incredible smoothie bar chain. Started in California. They're in Texas now. The founder, Khalil Rafati, that guy literally should not be alive. Just overcame so many, substance abuse problems, drug addiction problems, had it all, lost it all, had it all, lost it all again. And just people like that who really shouldn't be here, but they are, and have not only turned their lives around, but have created something to give back to the community and other people in such a big way. It's like, damn, I can't complain about anything else in my life again.
Absolutely. And to be honest, one of the reasons I wanted to have you on this podcast was because as I got to hear your story the last time we spoke, I realized that you've been through a lot of adversity. You faced many obstacles, but those things have gotten you to where you are today. And you have a very unique perspective on life. And so I'm just going to jump right in with the first question. And that's, what is the hardest thing that you've ever had to handle in life? So a circumstance that you didn't necessarily have a choice in.
I feel like I've got a few. It's like asking I assume it's like asking a parent, pick your favorite kid kind of thing. Except for me, it's pick your favorite worst scenario.
You can give me a couple.
I'll say one that actually I've been kind of reprocessing or processing really for the first time. I went through some serious injuries my time in the military. I was training for a deployment. Actually, I was just in war games, but the injury was so significant that it actually pulled me not only from that deployment or any possibility. I wound up getting swapped over to a med hold unit, and ultimately had to have both of my hips reconstructed. I was no longer a soldier. I couldn't do my job for almost a year and a half, and I was just a patient. I was in and out of the hospital. I was going to rehab, pool therapy. I was at home, bedridden. And I was like 21, 22 years old, something like that. And I kind of just at the time took it as, all right, well, this sucks. All right. Okay, just, I'll do my thing. And then I'm getting med boarded out. So I guess I should begin to think about what I want to do with the rest of my life. Again, the military was going to be a career for me. I'd planned on staying in for 20 years. But honestly, through really kind of the last couple of years, really addressing at a very, very deep level, personally and with professional help again, just what it means to revisit and to process and to learn from significant traumatic events. I've made progress in a lot of other areas, but I'm kind of coming back to wait, actually, this was really, really significant. I never really kind of gave it the credit that it deserved, really, of physically what I went through. mentally, emotionally, what I went through, physically, of being a broken young man, being at, the peak of his military career, to being completely bedridden and dependent on people to, to do everything, to wipe my ass, to everything. Like, I'd never processed that. And now I'm looking back on it. I'm like, wait a second. I had a huge loss of identity there. I lost my career. I lost who I was, what I was physically capable of doing. I was forced out of this event to change the course of my life again. I had done this once before when I decided to join the military. And now I'm kind of just realizing in small little ways, like, how that actually has influenced my life, how it has influenced certain behaviors that I have, and how I even look at the day and how I look at certain things. And, in some small ways, still kind of live in fear of re-injury. It imprinted on me and in me in a much bigger way than I ever gave it full credit for. And so I'm actually kind of revisiting all of that now and hopefully trying to work through it.
I'm curious, what was the spark that made you think back and say, I should look at that again, right? Because it's been a long time since that season of life. What made you want to look back?
What made me want to look back? Great question. It was kind of just the realizations that I was having after looking back at other significant life events and other traumatic events and other hardships. It's kind of like how, when you learn how to do something, like, you want to apply that approach maybe to new tasks. Like, I learned this great new way in the gym for me to, I don't know, move extra weight, or I really narrowed down this process in my job or in my day. So let me kind of just take that same concept to another area of my life. It's just a new form of awareness. Like, once you're aware of a unique way of how you tick and how you can approach how you tick, it makes you just curious, I think, of, well, what are the other ways that I tick? Can I optimize another way, or can I improve something? Or am I fine with leaving well enough alone? Am I even well? So it just kind of opened me up to the possibility of maybe there are other areas of my life that I could just entertain. I could just look at. I mean, where's the harm in that? Even if I do think I'm fine in this area and I've moved forward and I resolved it, I'm a different human being now. We all grow and evolve over months, years, decades. And, you might have now a new ability, a new perspective that you didn't have before. And you might find something out of that experience that you need to pull out, that you want to pull out. You might now finally be able to, be in a good headspace to actually really receive that lesson. Maybe it's forgiveness of yourself. Maybe it's forgiveness of another human being. Maybe it's finally like letting go of something. Maybe it's moving through into another phase of grief. It's just, I became more curious about, well, if this worked in other areas, what is another area that I can maybe apply it to?
Yeah, it's interesting. I know you're big into wellness, and so I want to ask you about that. But before I do, I think a lot of times people think about wellness and health and happiness as just the positive, right? Life is good. Everything's good. No problems. Like, that stuff in the past that happened, it was painful. It was uncomfortable, but I'm not going to look there because, like, we're good now. What is the interplay between wellness and the uncomfortable work that sometimes we have to do to get to a place of wellness, if that makes sense, right? Because I maybe a better way to phrase that question is, what is the relationship between wellness and discomfort in your mind?
I think the only way to have wellness is from a place of discomfort. I mean, the only way that we can understand what good feels like is to know what it doesn't feel like. The only way we can know healing is to know suffering. The only way we can know what progress looks like is to know what being stagnant or falling backwards feels like. You can't know these things unless you've been on the other side of the coin. And so I think you're absolutely right. This whole idea of wellness only being like the happy things of, I'm going to have self-care. I'm going to take care of my body. I'm going to look good, feel good, all these things. Well, those are just kind of like the easy check marks, I think. wellness, for me, the definition is really, it has to be multifaceted. You have to have a multifaceted approach to the areas, the components of your wellness that you are working on. And you would be a fool, you'd be extremely naive to think or to believe that you only have good things to work on. You know, just the fact alone that you're like, I want to improve my wellness, means that there's some things, or there's something that is not well. I mean, maintenance is a great thing. Maintenance in many ways, dependent upon your goals, is a great form of wellness. Like just keeping yourself performing well and sleeping well, and your weight, your body composition, your mental health, like just maintenance takes active work. But just the fact that you think of, I want to work on my wellness, implies that there's something that's not well. And it's just, you know, out of survival, out of not wanting to get uncomfortable, out of fear, out of pain, conscious or subconscious, you know, we typically don't run to the hurtful stuff first. And I know I didn't for many, many years, but now that's really what I'm kind of applying. I've got this whole new philosophy of whatever I'm most hesitant to work on, like, yes, let me go there really quick. You know, whatever I kind of feel hesitance or friction, or, you know, I'm scared, or I'm worried about consequences, or I'm worried about what I might find, I'm really leaning into that, because it's the same concept. If I want to choose something in my life to work on, to maintain it, or to get it better, well, everything's at a different starting point. The baseline for certain things are just more comfortable, more easy, and we typically want to navigate to those first. But, you know, that's just the part that we see growing up. What about the root? What about the root of that problem? Quite literally, if you think about a root of a weed or root of a plant or whatever, like it is literally rooted underneath the surface. We know it's there, or else how would the thing above it be there? You know, this flower, this weed, this whatever that you're getting rid of, or you're maintaining, or you're grooming, it has to have a starting point. And that starting point typically lies underground and lies behind a lot of the unpleasantry. That's literally the dirty work in there, in the soil, in the ground. I mean, that's the dirty work of this stuff, that if you want to know the origin of how to keep something well, keep it happy, you need to know that. But also the same thing, if you want to uproot something entirely, then, you know, you've got to get your hands dirty.
You're speaking my language. I've got one tattoo. The people who listen to this podcast know it really symbolizes my favorite quote. And it's by this woman named Christine Kane. And she said, sometimes when you're in a dark place, you think that you've been buried, but you've actually been planted. Wow. And I've never looked at it the way that you just described, where that thing that was planted, right? It's surrounded by pain, darkness, trouble, whatever it is, challenge, obstacles. And once it grows, and that's great. But sometimes we have to dig down deep if we want to uproot that pain, if we want to get to the bottom of what's going on. And I think that's such a beautiful, beautiful image. And so, Chase, I know that the injury, the double hip reconstruction at 21 years old, was not the only hard thing that you've been through. So if you had to give me one more, maybe, what's another really challenging, hard circumstance that you've not chosen for yourself, but that you've dealt with?
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure you're probably talking about, you know, the loss of my father. You know, I buried my father at 19. He passed away from a very, very radical case, a very quick escalated case of ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease. It was diagnosed pretty much immediately after I left for the military. And about 18 months later, he was gone. And nobody planned for that. He didn't plan for it. My family didn't. Our community didn't. But I mean, why it was even so much more everything for me was because so much of the reason behind why I decided to go in the military was following in his footsteps. He was my best friend. You know, I was losing more than just my father. I was losing my hero, my best friend. I was losing my leader, all these different things. And it just completely, it happened so intensely that I think anybody going through that, of course, would be shooketh. But also for me, I mean, at the time, I mean, my family was on the East Coast and I was on the West Coast. I was thousands of miles away, just starting my military career. I couldn't be there for my family in their big time of need. And so it was very, very hard beyond just the obvious stuff. But I was just in this kind of constant headspace of, am I supposed to be here? Am I supposed to be there? I want to be there. I need to be here. Trying to do the best thing for what my dad would want me to do with my life, but what do I want to do to support him for the rest of his life? And it just rocked me. And, basically after that happened, to kind of what we're talking about at the beginning, was just a whirlwind of me only ever working on the surface level stuff. I didn't even want to acknowledge that there was a root problem. I wanted to just keep cutting it off from the top as much as possible. But while I was doing that, I mean, the roots were growing, and they were growing fast and deeper and thicker and stronger than ever, until finally they just were like, we're coming up. And they came up in the form of PTSD and panic attacks and being really big issues in key relationships in my life, particularly the one with myself. And it just finally was like, hey, I know I'm here in a very big way. And what are you going to do about it?
Man, I was thinking about this quote before we hopped on the podcast. It's by Khalil Gibran. And they said, to live in the hearts of others is not to die. And I was thinking about this a lot, because a lot of what I see you do, and even your brother Max, to be honest, I would imagine is carrying part of your father with you into everything that you do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that how you see it?
It was, and still is in a big way, but how I personally kind of just process it all, to move on, to move forward with my life. When I decided to kind of take those two words that was, his mantra, what he instilled in us our whole lives growing up, to move ever forward, was like a way for me personally to kind of try to heal. Because, all right, if I'm taking something that was his and I'm going to attach meaning to it, both personally and publicly, that's going to help propel me forward. And it did in a big way for a long, long time. But up until like the past year or two, I really have I've gotten better at letting that go. And instead of creating something, so that I can do something and create something that allows him to stay with me at all times, like that still was kind of like tethering to the past. And, like I said, it helped me move on. And the work that I was doing, the content I was creating, through Everforward Radio and everything else that we do, was also really, helping him live on through the hearts of other people. But, that's not really it. That's not, living in the past. Although you have a good reason or meaning, brand, whatever, you're still living in the past. And so I've really been able to kind of pivot and turn and just know that the past is there. I know that he's there, and I know all the things now that I've gone through, and I'm in a much better, healthier place of being able to just keep those things with me instead of just always fixating on them and being stuck with them. And just really being able to like really move forward in a big way, and just know that it's there, but not need to bring it with me at all times, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. And it's beautiful, to be honest. There's another quote by Helen Keller that I want to share. She said, "Character cannot be developed in ease and quiet. Only through experience of trial and suffering can the soul be strengthened, vision be cleared, ambition inspired, and success achieved." And it's clear that these hard things that we've been speaking about in the past have brought you to this point and strengthened you in many ways. My next question, though, really is, what is the hardest thing that you've ever done on purpose, and why have you done that thing?
Interesting question. Probably, the obvious one for me is, joining the military. And beyond that, I was 17 years old, actually, technically, back in 2003. So it was more than just someone deciding to serve their country and go enlist or whatever. It was during a very, very peak wartime, the height of Operation Iraqi Freedom and Enduring Freedom. I mean, we were a nation, we were a world almost at war. And again, I didn't really think anything of it. But, again, looking back through a lot of this work that I'm doing now, I'm realizing like, that was some scary shit. That was an intense decision. But because of the support that I had from my father and the insight and trust that I had in him, I knew that my dad would never, ever, ever want me to be in harm's way or would allow me to do something to put me in harm's way, and or if he didn't believe and he didn't trust in me that I could take care of myself, or that I was going to be in a community that could look out for me. And so doing that, like literally volunteering to a military in a wartime is a pretty damn scary thing. But I went through and I did my thing, and thank God I came out on the other side with my life and all my arms and legs, despite, even my best efforts, might have found myself in a circumstance where that might not have been the case. But yeah, it was pretty gnarly. And then a lot of things that I did in the military, my work was in military intelligence. So again, just actually reflecting back on such a young period of my life where I really didn't have the perspective or awareness of what was actually going on. A lot of the work that I did was some pretty gnarly stuff, working in the intelligence community behind the scenes, providing information for people with boots on ground, providing information for really unique missions that are the things that happen in the shadows that you see in movies and you don't really know about. And that's because we're the ones doing it. It's some pretty wild stuff that happened that I was exposed to at a very young age. And I'm like, I signed up for this. Like nobody forced me. I volunteered for this, and now here I am facing it. But because of that environment and the intensity and what we call the op tempo in the military is just like so laser focused, you don't really have time. You don't really have the ability or the luxury, or at least that wasn't the case in my experience, to have the gravity of that all sink in. Because if it does, or if you allow it to beyond the point of your focus, it has the potential to cost you lives. It has the potential to take away your focus, take away your skill set, your ability for even just a split second to do your job properly, which enables the guys and the girls to the left and right of you to do their job properly. And everybody's looking out for everybody. So if you're distracted, if the gravity of something is too much for you, well, then you become the weakest link in the chain. And then now that whole chain has potential for suffering. So I'm now, honestly, I got out at 24, I'm 36 now. So it's like 12 years later. And I'm just like, hold up. There's some stuff there I need to unpack. There's some stuff that really warrants some deeper diving and investigating the roots of.
Yeah, man, it sounds heavy. It sounds like at the time there was a lot of pressure with the role that you were in, but maybe you weren't thinking quite about the pressure at the moment.
What's pressure in the military? It's like I'm always running at 11. It's always like go, 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 go. I got to be here at this place at this time in this uniform, and like this is the mission, and these are the things. That was my norm. Running at that peak level for 4.5 years before my injuries was just my norm. And so when it's your norm, and also it's everybody else's norm around you, it doesn't seem odd. It doesn't seem like, hold on, wait a second, like, what's actually going on here? Are you feeling some kind of way? Like there's no time for that, and only until afterwards can you totally detach from it and have like now new perspective of being a civilian again and being in another work environment and just understanding how the world works. I mean, I had no idea. I had no idea what I was going through.
Did you operate at that same level, at that same pace when you got out of the military, just because that was your norm, or did things change pretty quickly after your injuries?
I'd say kind of like yes and no. I mean, still to this day, I have so many parts of my life and habits that are just ingrained in me from the military. like literally I get made fun of because people call me Officer Chewning or Sergeant Chewning. It's not like I'm like standing still. I'm walking with my posture up, or I walk with my hands like this. Just certain things like that. I don't think are ever going to go away. But I will say that having that downtime from not having any responsibility other than healing, I had about almost a year and a half of gray area of, I'm technically in the military, but I'm not doing my like normal soldiering. I'm not a civilian yet, but I'm in this weird kind of gray area. And so I feel like it kind of did allow me to like slowly transition more than I realized at the time. Yeah. But I didn't really have any downtime. When I got out, I was off, unemployed, had nothing to do for, I think it was like 3 weeks. And I immediately was enrolled and started going to school. Went to get my undergrad degree, and I was back home in Virginia, plugged in with my family. And I was just like, again, only know this now, I didn't give myself any downtime because that wasn't my norm. So I was like, all right, cool. What's the next mission? What are my orders? What am I doing? What's the task at hand? How am I supposed to show up? When do I need to show up? What's the performance standard? And cool, let me execute. And that's what I did for the next 4 years.
Gotcha. So those 4 years go by, and then I'll ask you one more time. After those 4 years, you're a civilian. What's the hardest thing that you've done since that time? I have a guess, but I'm not going to give you my guess until after you tell me.
So after, like, from undergrad to now?
Mm-hmm.
Well, probably the next scariest jump, that was definitely my choice. Was really leaving my job.
I got it.
We're on the same page. I mean, just that in and of itself, I don't think for anybody is ever easy, but it weighed on me more because I was like, this doesn't make sense. I'm literally working my dream job. I loved what I did. I was connecting and working with people that needed and wanted to get well. They needed and wanted to move again, to be strong again, to lose weight, to get off medication. I was working in this concierge medical practice that was it was everything that I wished that I had. And it was the type of care that I was always in search for. It's like, I want somebody who's going to work with me to help me move. Like, I'm unique now. I have limitations. I have injuries, but like, I'm not giving up. I also know that I need traditional care. I know I need a doctor, especially at that point. Like, I was still going to see my orthopedic surgeon like every year, every 6 months. Like, I need traditional medical care just to make sure that we're good. But I also want somebody who's going to work with me to, what are the best things to eat? What are the best ways to move? Like, what does wellness and health mean to me? How can I blend those two? And then that's exactly what I did for years at this organization. And I loved the people that I worked for. Like, we called them patients, my clients. Like, I was working with people for months, years at a time. And it was incredible. And I was like, how can this be possible? How can I love what I do and the people that I work with and the work that we accomplish together, but feel so disconnected from the organization? And why am I feeling resentment when I show up to work? Why am I parking my car and just staring at my building and not wanting to go in, even though I know that I love my clients waiting for me in there? That was it was like tearing me up. And so I decided, this is only going to go with the root analogy again. This is only going to dig deeper. These roots of resentment and frustration and bitterness and anything and everything that's not joy and passion and diligence and showing up for my patients and my team, like, that's a problem. So when I realized that those new kind of roots had gotten hold in me, I was like, I owe it to myself to be happy in what I do and how I do it. More importantly, I owe it to these people for them to have the best version of me in support of their wellness journey, and they're just not getting it anymore. So put in my notice and began to kind of develop my exit strategy and create my own online health coaching program. And at that time, the podcast was already live. And so I kind of began to figure out how to monetize it and just how to pay rent on my own for a little while before I really kind of figured out what I was doing, which I don't know if we ever really figure that out, but I know a little bit more what I'm doing now than, hell, almost 6 years ago now.
Yeah, I can relate to a lot of what you described when you said that you enjoyed what you did. You really enjoyed the people that you were doing it with, but you still were missing that thing, that joy, and you weren't the best version of yourself there. And that's also part of what pushed me over the edge to leave my job. And I'm curious for you what that experience was actually like when you were figuring out how to pay rent and trying to figure out exactly what you were doing in the very beginning. Because I think a lot of people, especially people listening to this podcast, they're driven, they're motivated, they want more out of life. And maybe they're thinking of some kind of change they want to make. And whether it's changing careers, becoming an entrepreneur, or doing something totally different, on the other side of that change is worry, fear, anxiety, uncertainty. And so when you actually got there, what was your experience in those first few weeks after you left your job?
I was actually pleasantly surprised. And I say that because I was kind of like in a unique situation to where I was leaving my job to do my own thing, where what I did for somebody else and what I was going to do for me was technically the same profession. I wasn't like, I'm leaving this organization, screw engineering. I'm going to go become a candle maker, so there's like a whole lot of new startup, I was just going from doing what I knew how to do, what I was educated and trained and certified in how to do for somebody else to now just doing it for me. And, I think that's a big lesson for a lot of people. If you are thinking about, or maybe you have jumped ship from a profession that you did for somebody else to a profession that you're now doing for yourself, and it's the same profession. I think there's a lot of fresh air in there. There's a lot of grace in there, because we think of just one thing. How do I do all this? How do I do all this? Well, you already know how to do it because you already are that person. You have the experience, you have the skill set, you have the degree, you have the certification, you have the whatever. So just remember that and own that. I also give a lot of credit to my wife, my then fiance wife. Yeah, we were married. And I remember her walking in on a few of my original like sales calls. I'd get some leads in from clients, and then I would be like, I would say what my coaching price was. I would go through the whole thing, but it was always still like, it was like $200. It was like, I'm Ron Burgundy. It was always a question at the end. She's like, Chase, why? Like confidence, they need to hear the confidence. Like, the price, say the price. It's not a question for them. Because if you lop up a question, what if they're like, no, maybe, $100. And so, I mean, having what I say with what I mean by that is, having just a person to be a support system, even if they're not in the same profession. I mean, she was not, she was a nurse, and, she's not an entrepreneur, but she's like, just hearing you question your own self is not a good thing. So just reminding myself that I am this person that I think I'm trying to be. I already am a coach. I already am a trainer. I already am this person. I am me. Now I just need to translate that and develop the skill sets like lead generation, like sales, like onboarding, like all these other things. And again, I already had a lot of those skill sets because I was trained by this other company and I had similar things. I just needed to find my own new way. So unless you're completely changing professions, really just take a moment and look back on that. Remember that you already are most likely the person that you're trying to become.
I like that a lot. And, for me, over the past year, it's almost been a full year since I left my full-time job.
Amazing. Congrats, man.
Thank you, man. And I think the business endeavor of entrepreneurship is really just personal growth, just disguised as like, okay, how do I, right?
Yeah. Well said.
Yeah. What are some of the biggest lessons that you've learned about yourself through the entrepreneurship journey? I'm curious.
That I definitely cannot multitask at all. Like, it's a total lie. And I'm pretty sure that's probably true for most people. They just don't want to admit it. I really thrive better when I have a team. And that can be, that could be a virtual assistant, that could be a partner, that could be a co-coach, that could be a co-host, that could be whatever. Again, that for me, it's kind of unique because I've always been around a team. I'm the oldest of three. I've got a brother and a sister. I was in the military. I'm always on a team there. And so there's like great power in being able to delegate things out. There's great power in release and knowing that the entirety of this mission success, of this profession success, doesn't fall on me. Now, I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, if you are a small business owner, an entrepreneur, and like it's your name on the dotted line, like, yeah, everything does fall on you. So it's kind of like this double-edged sword of delegate and let that go a little bit, but then also needing to take extreme ownership of it. And if you choose the mindset of everything is my fault, whether I succeed or fail, then you're always going to be learning. You're always going to be succeeding. You're always going to be learning, to sound cliche there. But, that definitely, I realized that pretty quickly, or I wish I realized it quicker, but, kind of just going back to my roots of what worked for me as a human being, like how did I make it this far in certain areas? How did I make it this far in relationships? How did I make it this far in being alive? There are little clues as to that. And so just kind of leaning back into past behaviors and stop trying to be everything to everybody really set me free. It really set me free. But ultimately, I'll say in my unique kind of entrepreneur journey, I think my kind of secret sauce, and I hope other people can interpret this as they will and apply it, because I do think it is so possible for us nowadays more than ever. To your point, I chose to put myself on a path of continuous personal development. And by that, personal development, wellness, by that, I mean, I chose to always show up for myself to help me move better, think better, feel better, look better, hopefully live longer, higher quality of life. I'm choosing all of these things that just optimize me, Chase, as a human being, things that light me up. How can I learn more? How can I act out of joy? How can I have fulfillment? And in doing that, like no matter where I go or what I do, whatever my offer is or whatever I'm creating, like it is all coming out of me running at my peak performance and just true happiness and fulfillment. And so when I create something out of that, or pitch an offer, or create a piece of content or an episode, or find a guest around a certain topic, it's because like I'm operating solely out of me. And then luckily we live in a day and age where I can create stuff like that, like video, like audio, like social. And then when I put that out there, it's going to attract other people like me, or maybe people that are trying to be more like me. And I say that not in like an egotistical way. I say that by like, Chase just does what he wants to do. Chase is sharing all these things that help his physical, mental, emotional, spiritual health, the ups and the downs. Like I resonate with that. I want to be more like that, not to be more like me, but just be more like how I do things in the pursuit of me, if that makes sense. And I think it's so possible now. It's so possible if we can just pull our heads out of the comparison syndrome, pull our heads off of social media every once in a while, and just look, instead of scrolling on your phone, just stare at yourself in the mirror. Like, what is that guy? What is that girl influencing you about? Like, what are you happy about? What are you sad about? Like, imagine staring at yourself in the mirror as long as maybe you scroll. Like, what can that teach you? That's some pretty powerful stuff in our own head and in our own hearts. If we would just be still enough, long enough to learn from them and then create from them, and then boom, you're happy and you got a great business at the same time.
And yeah, I can't add anything to that. That was beautifully said. Now, Chase, I have two more questions. This next one I think is going to be pretty quick, but the question is, what does the word endure mean to you?
What does the word endure mean to me? For me, it means bearing something that in the end, I know will serve me because I did it, but ultimately it's because someone else can't. I need to endure this thing because I'm the only one at this place in time who can.
I've never thought about it like that. And out of 33 times I've asked that question, nobody's answered like that. I thought you were going to say ever forward.
I can't be on brand all the time. That's just too obvious. Yeah.
I like that a lot. I like that a lot. And so another way of maybe looking at that, would you say, is when you're going through something difficult, challenging, heavy, dark, you are going through that thing because you are the only person in this moment in time who can handle that thing? Or would you spin that differently?
I think so. Yes. Yes, absolutely. I do agree with that. But also I'll say, when we are in the darkness, when we are in our hole, so to speak, we oftentimes think that we're the only ones there, that no one else knows what this feels like. No one has gone through this, is going through this. No one can relate to me. Well, there's one thing I've learned is that no matter what, no matter how bad you actually have it or you think you have it, there is one other person minimum that has it worse than you. I promise you that. Quick example is, I, again, through a lot of this work of reflection, I'm going back to with my injuries. What I went through really, really sucked. It really did. To be broken and to have your career taken away from you and to just like have to learn your body over again in a big way sucked. But at the same time, I was with other guys that were missing legs, and arms, that looked like modern day mummies because they're covered head to toe in gauze because they have 3rd-degree burns all over their bodies. And sometimes some of them had better attitudes than I did. And so I was like, you know what, this sucks, but they have it worse, but their outlook is better than mine. So that really, I think those guys during that period of my time probably saved my mental health, saved my outlook in ways that I'm still processing.
Yeah, it's a Henry David Thoreau quote where he says, "It's not what you look at that matters, it's what you see." And perspective truly is everything when it comes down to it. And it's really cool to hear how you witnessed other people's perspective in a way that ended up changing yours.
Yeah.
And I think that's a nice reminder to anyone listening, honestly, that no matter what we're going through, how we carry ourselves matters, not just for us, but for those around us, because someone's always watching, right?
Oh my God, dude. Yeah. Like, I could have a whole nother conversation about that. I mean, that just literally how you carry yourself. And for me, that kind of brings back a lot of like military bearing, just, posture and presenting yourself in a certain way, not to a point of like discrediting your emotions and always like stuffing it down, but just sometimes if you can just remember that, if you can remember, all right, you know what I just went through is breaking me inside, like tearing me up. This is a hypothetical situation. I'm already like getting emotional about it. Like there's literally like no real reason, but just like I'm imagining someone going through this. Just imagine that the second you walk outside your door, the next person you see has had it 10 times worse. And them seeing you, just being able to carry yourself, them not even knowing what you were going through, but just seeing another human being that is upright, that is giving eye contact, that is waving, that is saying hello, good morning, that smiles. It ripples so powerfully. And that could be a defining moment. I mean, I think back to so many times, there's so many examples to where like people were on the verge of possibly committing suicide, but just one act of kindness, a person saying hello to them, smiling, like whatever was enough for them to just snap out of whatever they were in. I mean, that's a pretty extreme example, but you hear about that a lot. It's just, you never know who is looking and what they need from you.
Yeah. Yeah. It's powerful stuff. And, I've told stories like that on the podcast before, and so I won't repeat myself, but as we transition into this next question, the final question, we just spoke about how you carry yourself matters, but Chase, as you know, having listened to, I'm sure, thousands of hours of podcasts, when you're listening to a podcast, sometimes you feel like you're part of the conversation. You feel like you're there with the other people. And so this last question, I want you to look at this as somebody right now is listening to us talk, and they might be going through a tough time. a dark season, a challenge, an obstacle that they just don't know how to overcome. If you are talking directly to that person listening right now, going through a hard time, what would you say to them right now?
You're exactly where you're supposed to be. That's been a new mantra of mine for a little while now. And it might sting to hear that, specifically for the example you gave of I'm in the shit, I'm in pain and suffering. To have somebody tell you you're exactly where you're supposed to be, it's not maybe what you want to hear. But again, for me, it all comes back to mindset and perspective. Mm-hmm. If I choose, and it is a choice, if I choose to think, and if I choose to believe that even in my misery, even in my woe, and even in my heartbreak, my loss, whatever, right now, that I'm supposed to be here right now, and this was supposed to happen, it forces a shift to look at it differently. All right, if this was supposed to happen, I'm supposed to be here, then why? That's the beauty of situations. I think things happen and we make meaning out of them. I'm not a big believer in everything happens for a reason. I like to kind of take the power back a little bit. I like to choose to believe that everything happens and then I get to attach meaning to it. I attach reason to it. So you're exactly where you're supposed to be, and just choose that and then see how your perspective changes. It might just be in one small little way, but you're taking your power back in that situation. I promise you.
Always planted, never buried. I love it. So Chase, if people want to connect with you, if they want to listen to the podcast, they want to just stay up to date with what you have going on, where are the best places for people to do that?
Yeah, come on over. I'd love to have you. Tune in to Ever Forward Radio. I drop episodes twice a week, Monday and Wednesday. Anywhere and everywhere you listen to podcasts, we put them up on YouTube as well. You can check it out, everforwardradio.com. And then on my journey every day on Instagram at Chase_Chewning. I like to think of my social media as kind of like the homework for the podcast. It's just me sharing, exploring things that I'm reading, trying, likes, dislikes for my wellness, physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. And then the podcast is where I sit down, long format, and either talk to an expert on it or kind of recant an experience of my own.
For anybody listening, I could not recommend Chase's podcast anymore. Follow him on social media. And Chase, of course, man, I mean it. And thank you for sharing part of your story with us today. And thank you for being you. We'll have to have you back at some point.
My pleasure, Joe. Appreciate you, man. Thank you, guys.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Project Indoor podcast, go ahead and subscribe, leave a review on your platform of choice, and share this episode with a friend. It helps us get more conversations like this out to more people like you. We appreciate you, and we'll talk to you next time. And one more thing. If you're looking for a community of people all striving to be better together, check out the Project Indoor Hard Things Club. The link is in the description below. We'd love to have you.